The storm arrived not with a whisper, but a roar that shook the very foundations of the lighthouse keeper's cottage. Elara huddled near the dwindling fire, the wind screaming like a banshee around the thick stone walls. Rain lashed the windows in horizontal sheets, blurring the view of the churning, ink-black sea below the cliffs. Each thunderclap vibrated in her chest, a physical blow that made her flinch. Outside, the ancient oak tree groaned under the assault, its branches clawing desperately at the night. Fear, cold and sharp, coiled in Elara's stomach. This was no ordinary gale, but a fury unleashed, threatening to tear her solitary world apart. The familiar creak of the lighthouse mechanism overhead, usually a comforting sound, now felt like the grinding teeth of the storm itself. She had always found a stark beauty in the sea's power, but tonight felt different. Personal memories of her grandfather, the previous keeper, surfaced, his calm voice explaining how even the wildest tempest eventually spent its rage. Yet his comforting words felt distant, drowned out by the present cacophony. A particularly violent gust slammed into the cottage, rattling the heavy door in its frame and making the chimney stones tremble. Elara wrapped her arms tighter around herself, feeling utterly insignificant against the elemental chaos. The fire sputtered, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed like monstrous shapes reaching for her. Loneliness, sharpened by the storm's isolation, pressed in on her more heavily than the atmospheric pressure driven by a nervous energy. Elara rose to check the window shutters again, though she knew they were securely barred. As she passed the small, cluttered workbench near the door, something caught her eye. Incongruous against the rough wood and tools, it was a single, pure white feather, impossibly delicate. It must have blown in earlier when she'd briefly opened the door to secure the woodpile. She stared at it, a tiny fragment of peace amidst the roaring madness. How could something so fragile even exist on such a night? It seemed absurd, almost mocking. She reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, not quite touching it, marveling at its defiance against the violent drafts sneaking through the old cottage's cracks. The storm intensified with terrifying speed. A deafening crack, louder than any thunder yet, split the air, followed by the sickening crash of rending wood. Elara rushed to the window facing the cliff path. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw the skeletal remains of the old Okayiro's largest limb, ripped away, crashing onto the path below. Mere feet from the cottage wall, debris swirled in the howling wind like malevolent spirits. The lighthouse beam, usually a steady sweep, seemed frantic, a desperate eye searching the maelstrom. Panic, cold and immediate, surged through Elara. Her breath came in short gasps. The walls felt thinner, the cottage less a refuge and more a fragile shell. The sheer, overwhelming force of nature threatened to crush her spirit. Retreating from the window, her gaze fell again upon the feather. It quivered violently with each gust, shaking the cottage, yet it remained anchored to the bench, held by some unseen speck of dust or static. Its tenacity, its quiet refusal to be swept away, struck Elara with profound force. In that fragile white plume, she saw not weakness, but an astonishing resilience acting on an impulse deeper than fear. She carefully picked it up. The feather was impossibly light, almost weightless in her palm. She closed her fingers gently around its softness, feeling the delicate structure against her skin, a tangible point of stillness. Holding it felt like clutching a tiny, silent prayer. Then, the impossible happened as she stood there, cradling the feather in her cupped hands, focusing entirely on its delicate presence. A profound shift occurred within her. The roaring wind, the pounding rain, the shuddering walls, they didn't vanish, but their power over her fractured and fell away. It was as if the feather's quiet strength flowed into her, creating a sphere of impossible calm around her heart. The panic dissolved, replaced by a deep, anchoring stillness. She could still hear the storm's fury, but it was now a sound observed, not a force consuming her. Her breathing deepened, steady and sure, the frantic drumming of her heart slowing to a calm, resilient rhythm within the chaos. Elara moved then, not with fear, but with a newfound purpose. She added a log to the fire, coaxing a stronger flame. She brewed a cup of strong tea, the familiar ritual grounding her. Further, she sat back in her grandfather's worn armchair, the feather resting lightly on the armrest beside her. She watched the storm rage, acknowledging its power, but no longer feeling like its prey. The feather was her anchor, a symbol that even the smallest, most delicate thing could embody a profound resistance, a quiet center capable of holding firm against the world's greatest tempests. It reminded her that strength wasn't always about brute force, but about finding and holding onto that inner stillness. Hours later, the storm finally began to relent. The wind dropped from a scream to a sigh. The rain softened to a gentle patter. Elara opened the cottage door as dawn broke, painting the sky in bruised hues of purple and gold. The air smelled clean and sharp, washed pure below. The sea still churned, but with spent energy. She looked at the feather in her hand, then gently placed it on the wind-scoured stone step. A soft breeze caught it, lifting it effortlessly, carrying it out over the calmer waters where it danced on the air currents before vanishing from sight. Elara smiled, a quiet understanding settling deep within her. The storm had passed, leaving behind not just wreckage, but the indelible knowledge that sometimes the smallest, most fragile thing can anchor the mightiest soul. She turned back inside, ready to tend the light, carrying the feather's quiet strength within her always.